Everyone, today we're going to talk to Julie Barlow. She is a business broker. I've known her for, I guess, a year now. I was essentially talking to her about potentially buying into a business, but that's now shifted to different. But then we were talking, she's like, hey, can we, talk about that here? So first, I didn't know she was involved in the health and fitness world and own businesses. So we'll get into that first, and then we'll kind of go into what she does now and who can she help, and I'll get into a few more questions in depth that I would like to know. So that will help people. So Julie, kind of get into your history.
Yeah,
We talked a little bit, but for the audience, I guess, get into your history, what you used to do, the businesses you did personally,
yeah,
and what we'll get into the shift, why you went to brokerage after.
right.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me, Raju. I have a very interesting background. I just recently switched to business brokerage a little over 2 years ago, and my background is in real estate, business ownership, and fitness. And so my business ownership centered around fitness because that's what I love to do. But started in real estate in 2001, and then I've owned three fitness facilities, two of which were franchises, a pretty large franchise chain. And so I went through the whole franchise selection, the SBA funding route, the applications. And back then it was way more paperwork back in '07, '08. And, launching, staffing, running the whole operations, marketing, everything, And so that was fantastic. Unfortunately, I had to exit those businesses due to divorce as I opened it with my ex-spouse, and he didn't want to be married and didn't want any responsibility with these new businesses. So the franchise helped me locate some new owners, and they're both still open to this day. So that's good, right? That's fantastic. But it definitely taught me a lot. And then over the years, as I go about my career, family and all that changes, because sometimes you work, full time, and sometimes you work part time, depending on what's going on with the family, what's going on with the economy. But I maintained my real estate career, grew in that, did a lot of different things there, and then during the pandemic, I got the itch to do something different, right? I got my broker's license and I was really struggling with being burned out on what I'd been doing, which was mostly residential real estate with a little bit of commercial. I was really wanting to make a career change and wasn't sure what that would be. But in the middle of all that, I also got the itch to do something in fitness again. So I bought a yoga studio of all things. And so I decided, hey, this is a good opportunity. It was a great price. I don't teach yoga. That's one of the few fitness things I don't teach. I mean, I teach all kinds of things, but not yoga. But I had sixth grade instructors that do teach yoga.
Mhm.
And so I bought a small studio. And when I did that, I had found it on Biz Buy Sell. It was listed by a business broker. And prior to this, I didn't even know what a business broker was. And so I asked him a few questions, I mean, how did you get into this? Do you like it? What's your training? Do you have to be licensed, certified, et cetera? And during the 2 years that I owned the studio, which also was more on the job learning, what business owners go through, I really did a lot of soul searching and decided I definitely wanted to make a career change. I looked into business brokerage and I felt like that would be a good fit for me because I knew my first time around, if I'd had somebody to help me and guide me, it would have been a lot easier. And I could help people buying and selling businesses, guide them through that process, just similar to how I've done guiding them through a process on buying or selling a home, but it's a little bit more complex. However, I was up for the challenge. I have a degree in finance. I love to help people. I love processes and systems. So I looked into it. I found Transworld, which is the best in the business, the largest and most active business brokerage out there. And their top office was hiring here in DFW. So I applied, interviewed, and they hired me. So here I am. And it's been a great fit for me. All of my friends and family feel like that I probably should have started this a lot sooner in life, as they feel like it really suits me, and I'm very much enjoying it.
Got you. But if since I know Transworld people, you and I have a mutual friend,
Yeah.
but I didn't think it was a job. I thought it was an independent, like you're essentially a broker or whatever, and then it's basically your business. I mean, your friends
Right.
is kind of franchise, right? Underneath them.
It is.
Yeah.
I work for the franchise owner, but it is, I mean, you're committing. They don't take part-time at my office. This is
Gotcha.
full-time. So
Gotcha.
while I am a 1099 and I am responsible for building my own book of business, they don't take people who are only half in. So they are selective on who they hire. My franchise owner is. There might be others that are less selective, but he's very selective because they want the people who are fully committed to going all in on this. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to clarify, get clear on that because my understanding was, I mean, technically there's no salary, it's more 1099. You're making your money, so I wasn't there. Okay,
Mhm.
let's
Mhm.
let's leave that alone. Okay, now I got that understanding. Um, so quick question, going back to your yoga studio, right?
Uh-huh.
You said you didn't have any experience, so you bought it because they had systems and processes. I'm assuming there was a yoga teacher attached coming with the business. It wasn't
Yes.
owner operated. So how did you
Correct.
manage to transition to that? Like,
Well, let me clarify. I do have experience with running fitness businesses.
right, that part we yes, I understand, right? But I'm talking
Yeah.
about because yoga studio means you got to know yoga, it's teaching if you're teaching yoga. So
Well,
how did
yeah.
you
And
transition?
so, and what I left out in the middle was I've also worked in for 24-hour fitness and other fitness companies in between owning my own. And so I have a really good understanding of the back end operations of boutique fitness, which is
Right?
what this is, boutique fitness. And so I came in feeling like, I can run this business and grow it, but you do heavily rely on your instructors when your entire service
Mhm.
is based on an instructor's classes. You have to treat them really well. I mean, they are helping you sell your service. And so yeah, so you come in, but basically I was a one-woman show. I'm marketing, I'm HR, I'm finances, etc. I did payroll company. I have social media. I learned how to do reels. I learned how to do all the video. You've seen me do some of that. That's kind of where it all started, and I acquired a lot of really good skills.
Mhm.
But yeah, the previous owner did not teach yoga either. And it
Mhm.
was previously a franchised operation, and he was at the end of his franchise term and not renewing. So
Ah,
when I bought it, we could go independent. Were not staying with the franchise brand, which gives you, there's pros and cons. It gave me a little bit more freedom. So
gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. So going back to it, right? So you did mention obviously you bought or ran a couple of franchises essentially, um, based on what you said, 24-hour fitness and what else was it?
24, I worked in the group fitness department as a district group X manager. I had 8 different locations. I was over their group X department. I also worked for Weight Watchers for a year. I was over multiple centers there. So I do have a strong background in health and wellness. But my ownership experience, those were Anytime Fitness franchises that I owned, which are about a 4,000 square foot footprint, right? And so it's a pretty substantial undertaking, pretty good amount of startup cash to get going. And, what I learned was that, especially the business I'm in now, it kind of underscores the fact that buying a business that's already open and operating is really a smart way to go because the first owner is the one incurring the debt,
Mhm.
putting all the giant amounts of investment into the business, having a giant learning curve, and oftentimes not being able to pay themselves for several years.
Mhm.
If you can come into a business that money has already been spent, the build out's been done, the systems have been built, everything's in place, you get to walk in years ahead of where they were when they started. So you're getting to benefit from their work. You're just going to be, if there's cash flow, you're going to be paying for that cash flow. But if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely buy facilities that were already open and running rather than starting from scratch.
Gotcha. So before we get into the whole, we'll get into that question about buying an existing business versus building it. But first, I want to go into the differentiation and, people to understand the differentiation. So my research into franchises and all is many times, depending, I guess, on the franchise, many times franchises end up being more like a job than business ownership. So what is your experience in that? Perhaps you did it differently where it wasn't a job, you kind of operated. But what do you advise? Like people looking at, buying a franchise, of course, they're even buying a franchise, existing franchise that already has everything. Obviously, you kind of already mentioned that, but I'm talking just about, hey, somebody building a business, entirely new business, versus buying
Yeah.
a franchise. What are the pros and cons, I guess you would say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, whether it's a franchised or non-franchised, you need to have a good understanding of how involved the owner is. Right, right. Like you said, sometimes the owner is not working in the business. That's what we would call a semi-owner absentee business, or they are fully working in it. And in some cases, people would say, well, that's like buying a job. Well, that's true. It just depends on what you want. If you get a lot of fulfillment from that type of business, like for me in fitness, I got a lot of fulfillment from being there every single day. That's what I enjoyed, right? And so, somebody buying into a fitness business, they may be more likely to want to be more hands on and work in the business, and they hopefully can pay themselves a salary. And there's the difference there. So if you are buying a brand new franchise, the chances of you breaking even in the first year or so are very slim. Generally, there's an on ramp of 1, 2, 3 years before you can afford to pay yourself. There's exceptions, obviously. But the biggest thing that I see happen is that people overestimate how quickly they can pay themselves with a startup business. And so this is why when you're buying an existing business, you want to have an understanding of how much is the owner paying themselves now, if anything, right? How many hours are they putting in? Is this something they can train you to do? Or do you already have the skill set? And would you want to work in this business like they are doing, or would you want to hire somebody to do it? And is there enough money to pay somebody else to do it? So we have to look at all of those factors when I'm working with a buyer. These are all things that I want to know from them. I want to ask all these questions so I can, it's kind of like matchmaking with the seller and the buyer, right? We have to find that right fit.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one thing, right? So one of the things, again, going back to the franchise, right? And depending on the franchise, how much you're paying the franchise, that obviously has to factor in as far as when you're making the revenue, like how much of that is going for the franchise fee.
Yeah. So on to that, I would say, because we do a lot of franchise resales, a ton. Okay. So when those original franchise owners want to sell, or the second or third, we do a ton of those resales. And so I still have a lot of contact with franchisors. I'll have to look at a lot of franchise information and understand the royalty fees, the ongoing fees, the improvement costs, what's the franchisor's requirements for a new owner to come in, et cetera, and how much support do they give the franchisee. So I recently sold a franchised fitness center out in Wiley a few months ago. And that's a perfect example. The person buying this, the original owner had owned it 6 years, and they were just burned out. They were just tired because they were working another job, and it just wasn't what they wanted to keep doing. This guy who bought it came in. He'd never owned a business before. It was his very first business purchase. And we had to do a lot of exploring and me connecting him with that franchisor to fully understand what they would offer him in exchange for his royalties. It's important that you see the value and that you will use it. My best advice, if you are going to buy into a franchise, is to 100% use every tool they offer, because that's why you're buying into a franchise, is the name and the processes, and the systems. They've done it. They know what to do. Your best chance of success is to duplicate it, and don't reinvent the wheel. If they're providing marketing pieces or marketing campaigns and they've done the research, pricing models that work, I would trust them on it. I would do everything they offer you, because you're already paying for it in your royalty fees. So you might as well use it and not incur more cost.
Yeah, so that's a good point, right? So the reason why franchise versus building your own business, um, I guess we'll get into it. Kind of what we'd like to share is about the systems and processes, right? Wherein you're trying to invent your own processes and systems. If you're building your business from bottom up, versus if you buy a franchise, most of the systems and processes are there. You're just following. Like if you buy a McDonald's franchise, it's, they're
Yeah.
my burgers are made, how their fries are made, everything is systemized. Of course, it's expensive to buy a McDonald's franchise, but that's a different.
Yeah, that's outside what we normally do. We don't do
Right.
McDonald's resales.
But yeah,
um,
yeah. So quick question is, yeah, I guess get into that part, right? When people looking into buying a business or building a business,
Mhm.
how important is that aspect, like the
As
system?
far as systems and processes and things, it's extremely important because it's a learning curve. If you don't have the support of a franchise and don't have suggestions, it's trial and error. How are you going to choose which payroll service to use, or do you need a payroll service, or how much do you need it? Do you need a bookkeeper? Do you need a CPA? Do you need, a lot of marketing material? You're trying to figure out how much should I use? Should I print these flyers? Should I just do these cards? You don't know, right? You don't know how much. With a franchise, they're going to guide you on all of that. Now, the downside might be that they might require you to use some of their vendors. For example, you must use our payroll processing company. You must use our software, etc. And again, I just feel like if you're going to be part of a franchise, you need to fully embrace it. Don't go into it if you're going to buck the system every term, right? The point is, it's the system you're paying to be a part of and to have access to all those tools and resources. So just go ahead and do it. Because when you are an independent, because I have done that too, it is truly sometimes a very expensive learning curve, right? You try check-in software. I give you an example of that. I changed my check-in software when I bought the yoga studio, and then come to find out it didn't sync with the door check-in sensors, and it didn't sync with this app over here. And I ended up spending a whole lot of money and it got wasted because it didn't work. And if I had still been in the franchise, they probably would have said, use this. Here it is. This is what you do.
Right.
So it's not that you can't do it. You just have to understand that, especially if you've never owned a business before, you're going to have a bigger learning curve, which is why it's also good to have, mentors. And, I'm a big believer in coaching, obviously, and getting support and being surrounded by peers that can help you.
Gotcha. So, I mean, we'll get into a little bit of the health part, how you got onto the health part a little bit
Mhm.
later. But the question I want to ask and want people to understand is one of the things that, many people miss is in the business acquisition world. Forget the franchise. We'll leave the franchise where we'll just go with whatever, franchise or not, business acquisitions. So there's one factor where it's EBITDA multiplied by 3x, 3.5x, whatever the case is, depending on the business. Sometimes it's 1x, it depends on the business, right? EBITDA is one thing, but many people, do not understand the difference between that and the SDE cash flow. Could you kind of get into that, kind of share like why understanding that, difference is important?
Yeah, with the size of businesses that we deal with, we use SDE because we only represent privately held businesses, right? They're not giant corporations. And so it's usually one owner,
Mhm.
maybe one manager, maybe two or three, but you understand my point. And so that owner is either able to pay himself or a manager or he's not.
Right.
And the bookkeeping is a little bit simpler. There's not an extensive list of CMO, CTO, CFO, all those things, right? And so seller's discretionary earnings, very simply is, we call them, it's the money that goes in that owner's jeans at the end of the year. What are they actually paying themselves? Forget depreciation, interest, forget all that, right? We add all that back in, but the difference with EBITDA, sometimes they're not adding back in or adjusting for owner salary perfectly. But with SDE, we are figuring out, can we add that back or not? If you're making money, is somebody else going to be able to pay themselves this exact amount? Because what we're saying with SDE, seller's discretionary earnings, is Mr. Buyer, if you come in and buy this business, this is how much you will have at your discretion to either pay yourself or pay somebody else to do this job.
Gotcha.
And so for very small businesses, that's what it comes down to, because we know everybody writes everything off, right, on their taxes. And so we have to adjust all that back and paint a realistic picture of what they can expect to compensate themselves or one other person.
Gotcha. There you go. So yeah, that's very important, right? So I guess people who are not familiar with normally how, I kind of did mention it, but normally, when you're I guess selling businesses, normally what do you list at you said based on SDE, normally that's what you list at. Usually what's the going rate? How many
So the multiple.
Yeah, multiples. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we also do a lot of asset sales, which if there's
Okay.
not a lot of net earnings, it's just based on the assets of the business, goodwill, things like that. Right. But ideally, we have a cash flowing business that has some earnings. And for the smaller businesses, under say, 750,000 market value, generally you're going to see a 2 to 2.5 time multiple. It depends on the industry. We actually have access to comps with my company. We pay to participate in these type of things so that we can go in and see in our industry what things sold for in the last year, what multiples they were pulling per industry. So I can do research and I can tell you that, for most consumer services at this range, it's in a 2 to 3. But, if you get up there into manufacturing, something like that, it may be 4 to 5. And if it's a very profitable company, the quality of the earnings increases. Therefore, it's going to trade at a higher multiple too as it goes up.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually, valuation. I found this out. It's not cut and dry. It's a science and an art.
It is.
Yes, it's both.
Yeah, because, based on what I've gotten into a little bit, which, yeah, since this is not my story, we'll not get into that. But yeah, it all depends. Like even, IT world where I'm from, the multiples are insane because it's not a lot of, I mean, there's not a lot of effort needed to have a subscription-based business, right? So it's a
Yeah.
lot more cash flow. So anyway, it's 20x and all that stuff goes on.
Mhm. Yeah, we always do our research. So when we take on a seller client, we are going to want to do evaluation first and foremost, and not only getting all the financials and information on the company, but just researching the industry and the size of companies, trying to find things that are comparable, so that we can give that seller an informed range on where we think the business will sell.
Got you. Okay, cool. So on the going back to the buying business, right? Since you were in real estate, kind of share with people, one of the things interesting facts I dug into when I was looking at businesses and potentially uh, buying a business at that point, which that's how we ended up talking, was the factor that for the same amount. Okay, I'm not going to say it because I want you to say it. Okay, kind of share like buying an average house versus buying a business, a size, kind of a business that's cash flowing. How comparable is it? How, for a real estate investor, understand what the difference is between the cash flow between a rental property that you pay X amount to buy versus a business of comparable value.
Yeah.
You give out those numbers essentially if you have top of hand. You don't have to give the exact numbers, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. When you have somebody buying income producing real estate or rental property, they're kind of looking at that ROI over a period of years, usually 10 years for most real estate, right? And so they're going to look at it overall with that picture. And it's a pretty solid upward trajectory, because the great thing about real estate is that over the course of history, it has always proven to be appreciating. There might be a dip, in certain years, as you know, but if you were to hold through, you're probably going to get your money back and then some. And so that's why it's widely known that real estate is one of the safest investments you can make long term. A business can also be a really good investment to make, but it's not as definitive on an upward trajectory, because it completely correlates to how the owner runs that business, right? And there are some things like industry changes, technology that could affect a business as well. Like the pandemic. Hello, that's an example. Nobody came out unscathed in 2020 and first part of 21. But overall, it's not a guarantee. You have to put in the work. And I'm seeing a lot of people coming to me looking for these owner absentee, and unfortunately, though, they have an unrealistic view of owning a business. It's unrealistic to think that even if you're not there every day, okay, even if you're not physically there, you still need to have eyes on the business. You still need to be paying attention to what's going on and being strategic and deliberate about it. It's unless it's a vending machine route or something where all you're doing is paying somebody to go out and you still, even then, you need to know what's going on. You need to have eyes on your business, because that's just the nature of it. It's your business, right? You have to drive it forward. So I am a fan of diversified investment portfolios. I mean, you should, if you have the funds, absolutely have some real estate, consider a business, consider some mineral deeds, possibly consider some multifamily, consider, all kinds of things that you could put the stock, stock market, obviously. I'm a fan of diversifying as you grow in your wealth and your life. Then absolutely, I think it's a great idea to invest in a business, but you need to understand that you need to pay attention to it or pay
Right.
somebody to pay attention to
Yeah,
it.
I was more talking about, there's a book called Buy Then Build.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, because he was a real estate investor, then turned to business
Yeah.
buyer.
Yeah,
If you
I've heard
read
that.
Yeah, if you read that book, right?
Mhm.
So he did the numbers there where, he basically puts down, hey, okay, 70K, you buy a X house, it's cash flowing this much. But if you get an SBA loan, you know, with the business, then you're paying way less, right? Like for 100K, you can buy probably $1 million business
Mhm.
SDE basically, or 300,000 SDE, right? So that's what I was trying to talk about is the difference in, yeah, there's all other factors, right? Knowing how to run
Yes.
business, that stuff is a huge factor between the real estate versus that business is because real estate, you just do the numbers and you're done. Maybe, yeah, you have issues with the renters or whatever toilets and yeah, those headaches are there, but you don't have a day-to-day operation headache that you
Right.
run into with the business, obviously. But the
Exactly.
numbers, that's what I was kind of like, you know
Yeah.
talking about. So okay, let's get into your health. So okay, so how did you end up getting into the health and fitness world? Obviously, you're an employee. Was it an employee and then you went to buy a franchise, or you were kind of already franchise owner and then went back to work for a franchise? How did
It
that?
probably just happened because I'm entrepreneurial. And so once I started growing in my fitness journey, I got my first certification in 2004, a very long time ago, teaching step and kickboxing. And shortly thereafter, I got my personal training certification as well. So I've taught multiple classes, but I also spent several years running boot camps
Mm,
for ladies and, also selling packages and things like that. So I started to run fitness as a business back then.
mm,
And I still, my passion for living a healthy and fit lifestyle continued to grow. And so that is part of what led me to want to invest in the first franchise with Anytime Fitness.
mm.
Felt like it was a good business model, and clearly it is because they're still open to this day. And not only that, the brand has exploded globally. But that is why when the ex-husband and I were trying to decide on what type of business to buy, franchise, and he had a background in fitness and physical therapy, we jointly decided we wanted to do something in the fitness realm. So that's why we decided to go with the fitness franchise.
Got you. And you were mostly managing that, or like mostly co-managing, or mostly you because you were
100%. I
okay.
have to say, X did nothing.
So you were 100% doing it. Okay.
No, from the build out to the launching, the grand opening, daily employees, scheduling, member specials, marketing, everything. I was over all of that. I did get a part-time manager for my second location, which helped me tremendously. And we did have employees. You have to have employees there to sell memberships, tour people. We also had personal trainers, we had instructors, and I was over all of that. So I was in the trenches with that.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, let's get into probably one of the last questions before I get into last three questions. So what is the type of people that should contact you or type of people you can help? Obviously, you're looking to buy businesses, right?
Mhm.
Everybody has their specialty. So what's your specialty and who are the type of people you can help?
Well, first, I would like to say that I really need more people who need to sell because I have so many buyers and not enough businesses to sell them. So, if anybody knows somebody who's thinking about retiring or exiting their business due to whatever reason, that would be a great referral for me because we need more sellers. Okay. And so, for buyers, I typically, before I'll start working with them, I want to make sure they have the education and the means and ability to pay for the business.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of first time buyers, and we also sell some very, very inexpensive businesses. I mean, I sold a $30,000 hair salon a few months ago, right? And then all the way up to 15, 20 million. That's about our enterprise value where we max out. But we sell little bitty businesses, so they may not need a lot of money, but they still need to have cash because you very rarely can get a loan for less than $50,000. So if they're wanting to buy a $50,000 business, they're probably going to need to have the money. Okay. If once they get up there into SBA land, 350 and up, obviously, do they have the ability to qualify for an SBA loan, and do they have the cash for a down payment? Because they're going to need 10% now, right? And so, I ask all those questions because I don't want to waste my seller's time, and I don't want to waste my time or their time, honestly. Sometimes they just need to go take a few more months to save up some money. And then I also let them know that they're going to need cash down even for a seller financed business, because all of our sellers that we represent, they're going to need some money up front, even if they're going to finance the note. So when somebody calls me and they have no cash, it's probably not the right time for me to help them. I will say you need to go save up some more money until you have about 10% at least of what you think you're going to spend. And sometimes that's just how it is. And then they can come back in a few months. But one of the misperceptions being that you can get a business for no money down. You can, but that's not typically our seller that we represent.
Yeah, I mean, those are off market and it's not that easy.
Yeah,
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
exactly. Yes. Yes.
So question on the SBA loan, right? What are the qualifications to people who don't know? What would be the qualifications other than the minimal amount, the business?
Yeah.
What is the qualifications that the buyer needs to have to get an
Yeah.
SBA loan?
Well, I'll tell you, that's always changing. And so, they update their standards of practice. I think it's every year, but we have a lot of SBA partners that we lean on heavily, to help us understand the process. But from my observation, there's two processes to seeing if they can buy a business with an SBA loan. It's, does the buyer qualify? Will they personally be able to qualify? And will the business qualify? So for the buyer to qualify, most lenders, of course, are going to have a minimum credit score. They're going to want them to submit a personal financial statement. It doesn't mean that they have to be making enough money in their personal life to support the business, but they want to know that they're making something. In other words, they're probably not going to get an SBA loan to somebody who is, working an hourly down at, whatever, and has no assets of any kind, just being honest with you.
Right.
So, and then the other thing they want to know how much cash they have, because they know they're going to need a down payment. Right. The other thing is that SBA lenders will typically look for relevant or transferable experience, right? So they've gotten a little stricter on that lately. They don't want to give a loan to somebody who says, I want to buy an engineering business and all they've ever done is office work, for example. If it takes a knowledge of engineering to do it, they're going to want to see that buyer has some skill set that can be transferred or is related so they can operate that successfully. So the lender will talk to them probably about their skill sets and their experience and things like that. But I do like to send my potential buyers to some of my SBA partners when I first start working with them to see if they are sound enough where that lender feels like, all right, if you get the right business, I feel like we could loan on this person. And then they'll usually also give me a range, right? Like, we're going to loan for them, but it can't be over X amount or something. And that's their call to make. And then I know what parameters I have to work with when looking for a business.
Gotcha. Question on the, you said there's two ways. One is the personal credit and all, and sometimes they will do it based on the business itself. So usually doing it on the business itself is also potentially 90%, or that's usually lesser than what they can get with both the personal and the business, I guess.
It's really hard to define it because I'll just say they can be personally qualified, but if that business won't go SBA, it's a non-starter.
Right.
right? If it doesn't fit their lending criteria. And our lenders are all a little bit different. Some of them favor restaurants, some are like no restaurants. Some people will do this at this industry and some won't, whatever. They have their lending boxes that they like to stay in. And so that's why it's important for us as a company to know multiple SBA lenders so that we can help our clients the best. But I've got buyers right now. They're good to go with the lender, but we have to find the business, and it's not as simple as you would think because they're looking at all these. They're looking at the adjusted SDE. They're looking at projections. They're looking at debt to service coverage ratios. I mean, they have all their formulas. But I can tell you that generally off the bat, most of our lenders will not, with a pre-owned business, loan on strictly equipment as collateral. They want to see some cash flow, right? So they're just not. I mean, I have a laundromat that's full of equipment. It's not new, it's second generation or third generation, but it's not cash flowing well. I can't get any lender to touch it.
Yeah. That part that makes sense, right? So because I just wanted people to understand like so, how the SBA loan kind of works. All
Yeah.
right. I had another question, but now it kind of escaped me while we were talking. So we'll just get into the last three questions.
Okay.
So the first of the last three questions is what's the best book that or what's your favorite book, I guess, more than best book, right? Your favorite book that you feel like everybody should read.
Well, I've
Religious, right? We're leaving the religious stuff out. Like everybody, obviously, if you're a critic, you'll say Bible or something like that, right? We'll leave that out. I'm talking
yeah,
about more of a normal.
yeah, I have two. I think for everybody, regardless of industry, Atomic Habits is really good
Uh-huh.
because it really underscores the power in tiny changes and tiny habits and how they build upon each other. If you're in any kind of sales, Sell It Like Sirhan is excellent. And I have read that multiple times. I've listened to it multiple times. I'm a big fan of his, and look what he's done with his company. But just the way he breaks it down, he has a method of follow up, follow back, follow through,
Mhm.
has been fantastic for me. And so a lot of people I know in sales also really enjoy the book and recommend reading it numerous times. It also talks a lot about relationship selling, right? Right? That people would rather go shopping with a friend than being sold to by a stranger. So it talks a lot about that too. So I think it's a great book if you're in any type of sales.
Yeah, that's a last point is a good point because if you're on LinkedIn, people don't seem to understand that. The
Yeah.
first message they want to sell. I'm like, come on, at least get to know me before you try. I
Yes.
mean, at least let's, kind of have a lunch and date before we kiss, or something.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
all right. So next question is, what inspires you to get up and do what you do every day?
Oh, time with family. One of my love languages is quality time. Always has been, always will be. And so my time with my family is the most important thing to me. And I am working towards getting to the place in my life where I can semi retire or at least slow down enough to prioritize taking some great trips and vacations with my family and loved ones and not having such a hectic schedule. And so for the time being, I have to put in the work, right? That's what gets me up every day to put in the work so I can reach that goal of having the opportunity to slow down and focus on my relationships with them.
Great. Well, last but not the least, what's the one tip that has helped you lately that can help others?
You got to keep going even if you're not seeing results. Okay. And you want to watch those who have gone before you, listen to their stories and learn from their mistakes and their successes, and just work the process, work the system, even if you're not seeing the results right away. Right. You can't be looking at every day, am I getting this? You have to look at, am I doing the things that are going to get me to that result? It may take a while, but if I do them consistently, I'm going to get there. So just focus on the process and not the end result, and you're likely to hang in there a little longer.
Yep, that's a great point. As Simon Sinek says, play the infinite game. Don't focus on the results. Just focus on
Yes.
enjoying the process. And it's easier said
Yes.
than done, but that's great tip. All right.
Mhm.
Thanks, Julie, for taking the time. And I'll be sharing Julie's info when I share the clips and the videos. So you can reach out to her I guess for now, if you're looking to sell, maybe she's more interested in talking to you than even buying because she got enough buyers.
I
So
love to talk to either one.
either one,
Absolutely.
I'm just kidding, but yeah, you can talk either way. Reach out to her. I'll be posting whatever links she has to maybe she'll have a Calendly or whatever she has
Sure.
that to schedule time with her to talk to her and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
again, Julie, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon.